Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It podcast. I'm your host, Robert Davis. Before we start the show, just remember to follow me on social media. My Instagram is RTD underscore III. Facebook is Robert Trey Davis III. Um, Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast. It's currently on Apple Podcasts, um, iTunes, iHeartRadio. Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and YouTube. And just appreciate everybody as we go through the season. So, with that being said, we'll start the show. I want to introduce my guests. Today on this episode is my parents, Shirl and Bob Davis. How y'all doing?
Hey there.
I'm happy to have y'all. I think because today's episode, I want to talk about just kind of like the world then versus now, how things have changed over time, and a variety of different elements. I just think it's interesting in the sense that there's so much going on in the world, and we often forget how it's changed over time, for better and for worse. And I think on the inverse of that, we love to kind of do comparisons of kind of how things were 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 40 years ago compared to how things are now. And I think that one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is that I think one of the best ways to see kind of where we are in the world is to understand where we've been, in terms of where we've been in the past, and kind of just where we're headed now. And just that, older generations have lived experiences that younger ones don't. And so, to hope that, somebody watching this might learn something that they didn't know just because they weren't there to experience it. Um, and yeah, I think it's just vital to have these conversations, before we kind of lose the opportunity to. And I think that's, a good thing to do. Because if we don't, that knowledge is forever lost. And so, yeah, just kind of wanted to give that kind of spiel to begin with on why I think so. And, in terms of kind of why this conversation matters, the world is changing at a rapid rate. Every day is changing. And I think kind of the question I want to ask you first is kind of what kind of change do you feel has been the biggest to you? This could be
I
anywhere.
think I think technology has been the biggest change. It's affected everything from the way we travel to everyday life, um, social media, all those different things that were not really there when we were growing up.
Yeah. It's definitely a huge, I mean, I think it's so ingrained in everyday life now. To your point, when I was growing up as a kid, I kind of came up, at least as the beginning years, before the internet and before everything kind of became, wireless or a device. And so it's interesting to see how the world had changed from when I was like 8 compared to now, and just kind of how seamlessly everything kind of moves to that. Um, and kind of the next question I wanted to ask is kind of on the opposite end, is that they say that history repeats itself, and just there's some things that are just that seem current, but it's really just kind of like a reiteration of the past. And is there anything that comes to your mind about that?
Well, I think racism. I
Yeah.
mean, it's been in the past and it's still here now. What do you think?
So the question is basically what hasn't changed?
Yeah. Is there anything that you feel, even if do you feel like it's just the same thing in a different format? I think that's
Mm,
racism is a good answer on that. That's actually probably a great answer.
I think I agree with your mom. Racism has been fairly consistent uh, over time.
Yeah, I think it's changed. I think you're right. It's been consistent. It's changed in the way that it might appear, or how people might phrase it, or the words they might say. But the concept of it, racism in a general
It's the
sense,
same. Yeah.
it's the same. It's not going anywhere. Yeah, that's a great point. Um, I think one question I wanted to ask you is, what do you wish, I guess, people from either my generation or younger understood from you all's, like from, from your generation or from your life or from you personally?
But they, excuse me, but they understood.
Yeah, like, in terms of, I know some people wish, like the younger generation was tougher or that they had more patience or that they had, a drive or not even just that, that they, um, I guess what's one thing that you would want them to take from you, I guess, instead of say understand?
Well, I'm thinking self-awareness. I think right now people had more interest in their culture and their history and stuff than they do now. Integration has caused us to um, become segregated within our own community. I say it like that. Um, I don't have a problem with interracial marriages, biracial children, things like that, because the world has to come together. But don't forget where you came from, because then you don't know where you're going.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, I think understanding to your point, or who everybody is. I think you may the concept that it seems like where everybody became more aware of their history, became more divided into particular segments, where everybody kind of classifies themselves off of very small things. And I think it does kind of take away from the general concept of where you come from, um, and just your own heritage.
No,
Um,
I don't know if I got the question right, but I think there've been more uh, changes even within our corporation. Our corporation, yeah, within each other area in the field. Uh, men um, over time have become more um, partial, in my view. Uh, Women, on the other part, have become more sick. What's the word? More, more integrated into the community. I think we as men, we have become um, more partial.
okay,
If
I
that's
understand that.
making sense.
No, it is in terms of just less involved in it, not as involved in the community, or not. You say, I get what you mean in terms of partial, like women have become more involved or taking active
Yeah,
roles compared to ones that I guess men would have been in.
yes, I think you phrased it even better than I did. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think one wishing, that men had that sort of, I guess, drive or initiative to fill those roles or to be, involved or engaged.
Hmm.
Okay. Um,
You agree with that, Shirl?
Yeah, because women have stepped out and taken a bigger role as far as the family and stuff like that, where as men was always thought of as the head of the family.
Hmm.
But certain circumstances, even in employment and income, society has made, especially for black men, society has put black women ahead of black men
Hmm.
to try to demise the black man's role
Hmm.
in the home. So, yeah, I agree with that.
okay. And I mean, I think we kind of hit on my next question in terms of, well, I guess half of it at least. I was going to ask, what's the biggest, like, I know we talked about change in terms of technology. What do you think is the biggest improvement to society? And then inversely, what do you think is the biggest decline, that you've seen over your lifetime?
In the general society, what's been the most
Biggest
improvement?
improvement. I mean, yeah, in general society, it just you can talk about a specific part of it if you would like. I mean, however you see it.
I'm not so sure can specialize a response to your query. Um, we as men um, have been more in terms of over space. We have been more trying to come out, maybe come out and expose some of us, where over time we were, in my mind, uh, more partially or more, what's the word? Maybe partial isn't the word. Um, Whereas women over time have been pretty much the same, is what I'm trying to say. We've been trying to develop, trying to become more partial, more open in our postures and thoughts. Whereas over time, women, I think, have been more consistent um, in their posture and in their posture. Whereas I think we have been trying to 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 open up and become more partial, more part of the greater society.
Okay. Mama, do you have anything you think is like in terms of biggest improvement or decline or both?
Well, going back to technology, I think that's the biggest improvement in society because you have now space travel, air travel, things like that have become more advanced and simpler to do. But by that same instance, technology has been bad because now you have all this A1 that are replacing people on their jobs, that are giving you falsified information. They can create people's likeness, and it's not that person. And they really take the technology with A1 has kind of taken the place of a lot of stuff.
AI. AI.
AI, yeah,
Mhm. I get what you mean.
What's AI?
It's it's like a
artificial.
yes,
Artificial
artificial
intelligence.
intelligence. It's like when you ask Google, like when you can just ask Google like for your crossword answers, and you could just ask Google a question and it solves it and it figures it out for you.
Yeah, and then you don't have to think about it.
Just
You can just ask Google.
act
Yeah,
Google.
Mhm.
it's
I
like
think that's an accurate point that you make. Yes,
yeah,
but
man.
yeah, we have become, we men in particular, have become more open than in the past. To me,
Okay.
um,
And I know one of the things, in terms of just different examples of kind of what's happened, um, we talked about technology. We talked a good bit about that, and just in terms of just communication methods, now there's kind of many ways we can talk to each other compared to the past, phones, just how kind of everything is kind of went into having a phone now, which is a definite change, from over time. Back from I remember, when we had like the big block ones, and even before that, I think the reliance on cell phones is kind of been um, monumental. I don't think it's detrimental, but it's been monumental, and I think it's impact. Do you think in terms of technology, do you think it's had an impact on people's attention spans?
Yes, because you don't necessarily have to really read anymore. You can just listen to certain things, and people don't sit down and have conversations anymore. They rely on information they can get off of TV or off of social media, things like that. So it takes away from one-on-one conversations. Um, and even with cell phones or Zoom and things like that, it kind of takes away from being face to face and having that interaction, personal interaction.
Me like be have more open minded and
You know, you lose
your
your
thought.
attention span because you don't have to pay attention when people are talking.
Right?
No, Dad, I'll ask you in terms of that because you used to do the radio show. Would you have preferred being able to do it in the way that I'm doing it now, where we're in different rooms, or would you have preferred to have been in the same room with your guests? Well, no, I mean, no, because even with the call in, y'all did a virtual because you did the call in. So, I mean, you had to talk to people virtually in a way.
Yeah, yeah. I I don't see a great difference in what you're doing than what I did in the show that I have, quite honestly. Um, actually, over time, I imagine we've all become more open in the conversation that we've had. I think the radio show that I did allowed us to express viewpoints that we only did in close one-on-one conversation. One is open. This show, the little bit that I'm experiencing of it, uh, opens you up more in terms of your thoughts. Uh, I'm not being too.
No, I understand.
This opens you up.
And question I wanted to ask, I know one of the biggest things that people talk about is the economy, in terms of just how things were back, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from ago compared to now. Um, and I wanted to ask you all, what do you think in terms of the economy, things that people talk about is, how the cost of living has went up or how, jobs aren't as available as they were, or, that people aren't working as hard as they were. Everybody kind of having a side hustle now, debt, like they say, people could, a lot of, like with student loan debt or, house debt, and people, a lot of people have a high amount of debt. Um, like the pressure to always like buy things and spend money on things. And just wanted to ask, kind of what comes to mind when you think about the economy and compared to like over time for you.
Well, the economy has pretty much always been kind of hard because people have had to work hard through the years, whether they were doing labor jobs and then became jobs such as lawyers and doctors and things like that. But it was still, you had to have the education and the knowledge to be able to do those things. And like you said, going back, if you have student loans and loans to pay back for your schooling. So I think in terms of that, the economy is pretty much the same. The cost of food and all that is going up, but still you have to put in the labor in order to be able to make it.
I think I agree with you, and I think women have become more a central part of the economy uh, and the basic existence of family, of family. Uh, whereas men um, have had more opportunity to expand uh, into other areas than we have in the past.
Okay. And one thing, kind of bouncing back off the economy, because I think I agree with you, is that I think the general concept of, things are high, you have to work, to get by. I think that's always going to be the concept of the economy,
Oh, I agree.
in a very general sense. And I think people have always been, working, working jobs or side jobs as well and things of that. I don't think that is much new. And I don't think the pressure to buy anything is new. I think, people are still always kind of, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Pressured to buy.
Mhm.
Um, but one thing I wanted to ask, kind of bounce piggybacking off the economy, was kind of employment or working, and that whole thing, that whole kind of concept of working and jobs. Because I know, one thing that's more apparent now is, job hopping. People don't stay at the same job for
No, they don't.
10, 15 years anymore. We talk, one thing that I'm blessed to have it heavily in my job is the ability to work remotely and, do things and be able to not always be on ca- um, campus or on site or, or anything like that. Um, and, I think there's definitely also been a shift in, like work ethic or desire to work. I think some people are more comfortable not working more now than in the past.
I agree with that, Trey. I agree with that 100%.
And, obviously wages has always been a thing. Work-life balance has always been a thing as well. And I think a growing thing over time, and just with that as employment wise, I know, Mom, with you, you always talk about how like you wish virtual work would have been something that was around when you were there. I mean, when you were working.
Oh yeah. It's hard maintaining a household and children when both parents are working full time, simply because even with transportation, somebody has to pick up the child from school, or you don't necessarily want your child to come home to an empty house, that lock key kind of thing with kids. Um, it's not as safe because neighbors don't look out for neighbors like they used to.
Hmm.
And when your kid used to mess up, I know when I was growing up, if you did something in the neighborhood, then everybody told your mama. That it wasn't a situation where people just sat back and talked about it. They told on you. And a lot of times they would discipline you too,
Yeah.
because that was just how the community worked together. So
Do you think that's the same now today?
no, no. You can see kids doing stuff now and people won't say anything because they're not raised like that anymore. You know,
Right.
the parents don't want you talking about their kids. They don't want you disciplining their kids when they see them doing wrong.
Mhm.
So that has a lot to do with. But even in maintaining a household, during the time that I was working, and I'm working 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, on my lunch hour, I would have to take my lunch hour and go to the grocery store and have my little list, try to pick up everything I can, bring it back home, and put the perishables in the refrigerator and leave everything else on the table and stuff, and go back to work. That was on my lunch hour, and then I would have to take care of everything once I got home after work, to keep from having to go to the grocery store on the weekend when everybody's out.
Is that
So,
today? What about today?
well, today, if you're working virtually, then you have instances where you don't necessarily have to be, you're not on a job, you're not accountable for just sitting there on the job and being there physically, even if you're not doing anything. You still had to be in place. So I think the flexibility of working virtually is better. And then the gas as far as going to work. If your kid is sick and stuff, or even during the summer, if you don't have a regular babysitter, it's hard to find somebody to keep your kid when they get sick, unless you have family living, right there in the
Right
community
there.
with you. So it's a lot of good things about virtual working.
I think so. I definitely think it's been because I started working pre-COVID. I remember what office life and everything was like before that. And so I remember, the concept of working 5 days a week, 8 hours a day and just being in the office every day and just how that's not, I think some places are trying to make that more the norm again. But for a lot of people, that's just not, how things are anymore.
Yes, sir.
And yeah,
I agree.
I think one thing I wanted to ask, and you kind of went into that, was society in a sense of like, I know we talk. I mean, we talked about kids and definitely, and like just not kids, but community and sense of like raising and looking out for each other and being able to hold each other type of accountable in that sense, or and how that's kind of changed. Um, we see things on the news all the time, like drug epidemics, um, protests, education changes. How people kind of went to the internet. Um, and just kind of want to see, ask what comes to your mind in terms of just like how things have changed over time in terms of just society in general. I know, we talked about obviously men being more active, not active, but men being more kind of trying to find a position in this, and women being more, what's the word I'm looking for? Stable in society. And we know we talked about that, but just wanted to see if there's anything else.
I need that from you. But
Well, like I
initially,
mean, like one thing, and when I ask that, like some things I think are the same compared to different. Like I think like the drug epidemic, for example, that they talk about now, like the opioids and stuff. Um, I think that's the same as like the crack epidemic that was in like the '80s in my mind, but it's different because it's a different. I mean, that one affects white people more than the crack epidemic affected black people. So it's like, oh, it's a drug epidemic, but it's the same thing. Like, we talk about like we see like all the protests. Like even when I was coming here, when I was dropping off that stuff at the UPS store, um, and over by Friendly Center, there's a protest. Donald Trump, over the taking of the guy in Venezuela, the president of Venezuela, and they're protesting that. And some people might say, "Oh, that's a new thing, or that's a sign of the times." But I mean, people have been protesting forever. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think in terms of society, a lot of things that I think are the same. Health. I mean, I think we've always had health issues. COVID is different. COVID was obviously something brand new to I think a lot of people. At least
But
I.
then you had things like measles.
Yeah, I guess you.
We had an outbreak of measles, but measles has been way back. But we used to have vaccinations. We, Kids don't have to have vaccinations anymore, but it was a must in order for you to go to
go to
school.
school.
You had to have your vaccine,
Yeah,
and now it's like they don't care. And I don't understand that because when you have a kid that's sick come to school, then they're infecting a lot more than themselves. They're infecting a whole group of kids.
yeah, I agree. I mean, it's definitely. I think one thing that brings up with like the society thing is I think people are more. I think some people are so untrusting of everything they believe. They're kind of. It's like the concept of like if you don't believe anything, it's the same thing as believing everything. Like some people are so not trusting of what they believe to be the government, and I think this is a change over time. I think 30, 40, 50 years ago, like with vaccines, if the government said, your kids need these vaccines, these, 10 vaccines, people will go along with that and say, okay, well, the government said that we need to do this. I think today, if somebody said, I mean, the government, like we saw with like the COVID vaccine type of thing, and where the government says, hey, this vaccine is for COVID, and it's a help you against this, thing that's causing this outbreak. And a lot of people were like, no, I'm not taking that. I don't believe you. Or even the RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy, the guy, that's the head of the Health and Human Services. I saw where I think he lessened the amount of mandated shots for infants. It's from like 17 to 10 now. So it just seems like people are a lot less trusting of experts, of expert opinion. I guess I'll say. And they do their own research and feel like, oh, I know, what it is, and they kind of go with it from there. But I think that's kind of the problem to a
Yeah, I
degree.
know. And let me be on my radio show for a minute. Why do you think that's the case? Because in the past, uh, medication was just something that the whole community and everybody in the family uh, uh, really kind of emphasized. Uh, you couldn't go to school and go out and play and stuff and all of that if you had any kind of medical conditions and what happened. But whatever. Today it don't seem to matter to to, to us.
Yeah, I think.
Not the way it was when I was coming up. Anyway, everybody in the Delaware community knew that, you know, Robert Davis had no business outside because he has a certain kind of condition. Today, it don't seem like the community give a damn. Excuse my expression.
No, you're fine. Y'all might want, because I think the camera shifted a little. You might want to move to where, yeah, like that way. Move.
Okay.
You might want to scoot down just a tad. Okay. Um, because I don't think you
You
can touch
want me
it.
to ease in a little bit like this?
No, yeah, that's fine. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think people. I mean, to answer your question, I think people feel people have always felt lied to by the government, and I think you've always had the people that were like the conspiracy theorists. I think the problem now is that being a conspiracy theorist is popular, and so everybody. And I also think the internet, because the internet will provide you whatever it is you're looking for. Like whatever information, it might not be true, but whatever it is that you're looking for, it'll give you some false hope to believe it. And I think, when people are on like they're in like their social media and they're scrolling, looking at all these different videos and stuff, and it's just feeding them the same information they already believe in. Um, it kind of makes it this way. There's not a lot of challenge of thought anymore. It's kind of everybody's looking for something that already affirms what they believe, and nothing that really makes you kind of have to think outside of yourself or try to figure out, am I, really right? Is kind of everything is just more or less.
Well, I agree with you 100%. And, I guess I got to ask your mom a question. Why do you think that's the case? Uh, Even you have to ask you the question. Why do you think that's the case? Uh, we let kids, not just kids, but we let conditions go.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I think like I was saying, it's people not trusting of stuff. I think also on top of people not being trusting of kind of like in terms of like what government tells them if somebody was sick or anything. I think also um, we have tried to be kind of as inclusive as possible, and I think to a degree that's kind of been a detriment. Because if you try to make everybody happy, it doesn't work. And I think to a degree, people have tried to make everything to where no matter what the case is, you can be in it. And I think that's been kind of part of the problem that we've seen. And it kind of brings me to the next thing. We talked about this earlier in terms of just things that haven't changed over time in terms of racism. But I wanted to ask just what's the changes that you've seen in that? Because I think racism is a very funny point to the part you brought up earlier because it's something that's changed a lot, I think, but it's stayed the same over time. I think because while I think, in terms of like neighborhoods, like even where we live in, I think people still live in areas that are some white areas, some black areas. There's still a lot of states, even particular, that are majority white. A lot of places just generally that black people don't live in the United States. But I think in those areas where they do, and even in culture itself, black people are kind of everywhere. It's not like it's a shock to see them. You have all these different apartment complexes and stuff like that where people live in together and stuff. Um, but racism still seems to be there. Like it still seems to be what kind of just something that drives a driving force. Um, and I think it's I think, Mama, you talked about a point that I've noticed in terms of just racial awareness. I think there's a lot of people that, whether it's because of the time that's passed or whether just because I think to a degree people want you to forget about race. I think I try to sweep it under the rug when I say forget about it. Is that I think there are a lot of people that don't have racial awareness or who they are, or even just what race has been in this country. Um, and it's just, but yeah, I just want
You
that.
think that's the case?
Oh yeah.
Well, I think racism, for the most part, back in the day was more overt. People were open with it. As the years progressed, it became more covert in the way that there was housing discrimination, um, where you could live, whether or not a bank would give you a loan and stuff like that. Right now, they still try to cover it up, but they really don't cover it up because you can still go in a store today and the person of color that walks into a store, they're going to watch that person of color, but it would be the other minority or majority person that's really doing the stealing. But they're not watching them. They're just watching the person of color because that stigmatism that hangs over people of color.
Well, I agree with you 100%.
And what? Yeah, one thing I wanted to ask in terms of that, because I agree with you that it still is there in the same way that it always has been.
Always has been. That's right.
And that kind of segues to the next thing in terms of politics. I think, politics has always been the same. I mean, I think it changes in terms of the people, obviously, but it's always been kind of the same thing. I think, I don't know if there's ever been something like Trump before, but, it's definitely, at least in my experience, new. I wanted to ask if you all had ever seen kind of, if the concept of Donald Trump was something that you had never seen before. I mean, because like, I guess we never thought that like Obama would be president. So I guess anybody in that sense can do it, but
Well, I think that's an example of racism within itself, Donald Trump,
yeah.
because there's a certain minority of people that back him, but it doesn't mean a majority agree with him. There are instances where you would not have a man so crass as to call people out or talk about people that have passed on like they were nothing, to make fun of people who have disabilities or who die of cancer, things like that. And, society would not have accepted that, but now it seems like they do. This man is supposed to be the leader of a country, a free nation, and he's trying to revert it back to make America great again. What does that mean? Because America was supposed to always have been great. But if you got to make it great again, then there's something that happened that's wrong in order for you to use that phrase. Because I don't see where he's making it great again. I think he's dividing the country more than he's doing anything. And the power play should not be on the president. It's everything that he wants to be done. If he doesn't like people of color, then he's gonna talk about them. He's gonna people who disagree with him. He's telling his base to go out and kill them. Destroy their homes, destroy their lives, and things like that. But it's all about him. So I don't think I've ever seen in my life a president, but then Woodrow Wilson was an example of a racist president. When he had the Klan marching in the streets and stuff, when he was sitting up there as president. So it's always been there, but Donald Trump is the extreme. I'll just say it like that.
Yeah, I think he has been a representative of people being their most extreme or their worst selves. I think he allows people to kind of delve into that very dark part of themselves to be like, and be able to express openly what probably a lot of people have been hiding, for a long time. Um, I mean, I think it adds to the level of craziness that you kind of see in terms of, like stuff like mass shootings and just kind of the corruption that from everybody now, that like everybody seems to be, corrupt or stealing or doing something improper or having some sort of allegation or anything like that. And then just, like the random violence that, we see, I think that, every night we see on the news. And I think it just kind of adds to that level of craziness we've kind of seen in the world now, in terms of just kind of people not having that general sense of care or community anymore.
And it seemed to be increasing to me as an old man over time. From my viewpoint, and see it spreading.
Is there anything that's happened in the world that you would never have imagined, or just genuinely just like you could say you've been just surprised by?
I think cloning is something that I never would have imagined because um, they've gotten to the point where they're cloning animals,
Mm-hmm.
so they'll start cloning people next.
No, yeah, I'm sure of it.
Because that goes back to what the days of Hitler, when it was blonde hair, blue eyes, that was
Create
supposed
the
to be the
perfect human
master
being.
race,
Yeah.
and that's what he was trying to create, a master race. So I think cloning is the thing that I thought I would never see like this.
Do you think, let me make sure I understand where you're going here with this conversation. Do you think the current president is cloning?
No, no,
No,
no. I was
no.
just asking, was there no, I asked was there anything that's happened in the world in general that you would not have imagined or was genuinely surprised by? And mom said she was surprised by cloning. And so I asked you the same question. Is there anything that not about the president, just is there anything that's happened in general over your lifetime that you were surprised by or just never would have imagined has happened?
That a president was,
No, not a president.
oh,
Anything that's happened
in the country, in the world?
in the world
Mm.
that you never would have guessed would have ever been going on.
Yeah. Um, what's the best way to phrase this? But yeah. It's been more cloning in the sense of women becoming more uh, t- what's the word?
That's not cool. That's society.
Pardon me?
That's pretty much society. The way society has changed now.
Yeah,
That force women to go into the workforce.
yeah.
Okay.
I guess I got to answer. I agree with that. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Um, and I think we kind of spoke a little bit about some of the concerns that I had in terms of just kind of things that's happened. I think, we talked about kind of people not having values or morals as much, or that being a negative shift in kind of values and morals, or just, community, respect for your fellow people, discipline, loyalty, all those, or even just like dignity. Even when we talk about like just like all your public figures, everybody always getting in trouble for something. Um, I think we definitely have seen a decrease kind of negatively in that. I wanted to ask, if or at least I think so. I wanted to ask if you do you think kind of people morally are becoming less moral over time than they used to be, or do you think it's just kind of the same stuff in a different format?
I think so. I mean, I don't know. I've been around a little bit longer than either one of you two. Um, I think so. Answer your question,
Mhm.
and I don't think it's in one-sided in becoming more cloning, and more involved in cloning and things of that nature. I think it has spread. Um, I don't think it's unique to a certain segment of the community. Maybe I should put it that.
Everybody's, I understand. Everybody's kind of, it is impacting everybody in terms of, I think, the world in a general sense is becoming less stringent about morals. I think. Um, I think the one of the concerns I have is, I mean, I think people genuinely look to leaders. Whether that's right or wrong, I think that people look to something to model themselves out there. And I think one of the biggest changes over time, in my opinion, is that there's a lack of leaders today compared to in the past. Um, and in the sense of like, I think people use like politicians or athletes and all these things that people generally look to are celebrities, actors, activists, all these things that people look to, or even people, TV, all of this that people look to be kind of like their guide. Not I won't say their guide, but people that they looked up to. I think it's been it's less. What's the word I'm looking for now? There's just less of them now, or they're all seem, everybody seems to be
That's normality
No, less of them.
or
less
less.
less leaders. I think because a lot of them, people get exposed for things all the time now. There's always something coming out about somebody getting in trouble for for stealing or for some sort of inappropriate relations. The guy in High Point, the what is the city councilman in High Point, the guy that got with the girl, the teenager from Georgia,
Who's in the state legislature?
State legislature.
state legislator, yeah. So these sort of things where you have people that you would look up to and say, this is a leader of, and I think that's one of the things that has hurt the most is that, I mean, even Trump, I think back to that is a big example of this, where you see the president, the person that's in the highest position being somebody that's very, corrupt. And I think just the lack of leaders and the lack of people that are kind of being leaders is something that has been a big change in the world. Um, we talked about, kind of the impact of technology and how that shrunk everybody's attention and everything. Um, I think it's made us dependent on instant answers and gratification. Um, I don't think people have patience to kind of look things up anymore, or even try to work things out. I know with kids, a lot of time, to the point you were making with AI, mom, they won't try to work out a math problem or even work out like any sort of problem in terms of like school. They just ask, AI to figure it out for them. And I think that's a detriment, obviously, or a concern to have in terms of just how it impacts people's problem solving skills going forward. I think one thing that our generation, my generation and younger, does not have is the ability to kind of problem solve or to think on their feet, or to be ingenuitive. Is
Why do you think that's the case, man?
I mean, I think because technology has always been a crutch to allow for kind of an instant answer,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I and I think also, just a lot of people don't have life experience in doing things. A lot of kids don't know how, even teenagers don't know how to make themselves a meal if they was at home, because they've never had to touch a stove or may not know how to wash clothes or how to change a tire or, if the electricity went out for a week across the world, a lot of people would not know how to get by and just wouldn't know, how to operate. And so I think that's a definite change in the world, for I think the lesser is that I think I think in your generation and your youth, obviously you had to be more, you had to figure things out more than we do.
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem with us is that that's been kind of a blessing and a curse because it's a crutch in that matter. Um, I think we talked about community in a sense kind of weakening, and people to your point. I think if kids were acting out of line, somebody back in the day would say, oh, I'll tell your mom, I'll discipline you, and I'm gonna tell your mom and all this. Where now people are more willing to be like, that's not my problem. That's not my sort of thing. And I think it definitely weakened. I think there's still, I mean, I think it's weakened amongst people generally. I think people are still willing to kind of have their own village or, circle of people, but it's not just to the general public anymore. It's like almost like a coldness to a stranger. Um, I want to ask, do you think the world is more stressful now compared to, any other point in time?
More stressful.
Yeah. 'Cause I know people say that, the world it is, I don't
Yeah.
think the world is worse off or anything like that comparatively, but just want to know, do people like, I think one of the things that back to the thing about problem solving is like they say anxiety and all that really wrecks the younger generation. I think that's part of the reason why, is that they don't, not even, they're faced with kind of a complication. They shut down instead of kind of look to see, okay, how do I figure things out? And I mean, I think that's part of like, I guess where they would say that it's more stressful. And I don't know if that's the case or not, but just ask in terms of, do y'all think it is more stressful or not?
Yeah, I think it's more stressful. And I'm not sure I understand why, but yeah, I do think it's more stressful.
I think it's more stressful because, um, like you said, we have no leaders. So it's like a trickle down effect. If you don't have someone or a positive person that you can kind of look forward to or look up to, then it's a kind of a moral breakdown. Everybody's not a religious person because I would say look to God,
Yeah.
but everybody's not into religion. A lot of people depend on other people. And if they're not getting what they need from other people, then that gives them the stress in their life because they don't know how to problem solve. They don't know who to go to for the best advice. And if you're going to social media, things like that, social media has a tendency to lie or twist the truth, or depending on what news station you're listening to, or what the message is that you're receiving, um, it can be stressful.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree.
is and you might have kind of answered my question in terms of, is there one value that you believe is lost or disappearing in the world today, or what is in terms of what's your biggest concern? I guess not even just one value, but what is your biggest concern? In the I guess for how the world is, or is it? Yeah, I guess that phrase that question for today. Um, in today's society, what's your biggest concern?
Mine is a lack of humanity because we have no feelings for other people anymore. Um, we don't include ourselves as a part of the human race. We just include ourselves as a part of a race. And it's like um, some leaders are telling you or pitting one race against the other. And programs that were out there, just for example, feeding children in the schools, because not all children have a breakfast to eat in the morning or things like that that can help them through a school day. But programs that give out lunches during the summer, provide breakfasts and stuff like that. The funding is being pulled back on those. So what are you doing for the children? Um, Programs like that we feed people in Africa or either offer those medical care for people who can't have it. Well, the humanity is if you reach out to other people and you try to help other people, that's going to help you in the long run because you never know who you may have to go back to. So in a war, the United States can be as powerful as it wants to. But if we're cutting off people, cutting off any aids and stuff because we do have resources, then at some point, if someone should come after our country, then the countries that we've cut off, they could have helped us. So my thing is the lack of humanity. I don't think people care about people anymore.
I can agree with that. I don't think I do think that there's a lot of people have kind of lost their humanity as well, or they care for anybody, just at the general sense of what's going on with them.
Mhm.
Dad, is there any concern that you have with the world today, or is there anything that you think is an issue with the world today?
Yeah, unfortunately, I do. Um, I agree with your mom in the point she was making, but it seems like uh, as a larger groups, we instead of coming like this, coming together, we're going this way and circling in our own kind of area, uh, which creates a lack of humanity over space. If I'm making sense, people. I think we as a larger society have become kind of lost, uh, moving in our own little corners uh, and turning our back on the larger society.
Yeah, I can agree with that as well. I think part of what a lot of people today do is they do a lot of real self-actualizing of, oh, I'm this, and oh, I identify. I think this is very a culture based upon identifying yourself in all these different groups by your race, by where you're from, by what your hobbies are, by what your politics are, by all these different things. And I think in trying to categorize ourselves in all these different boxes, we've kind of
Mm-hmm.
it's hard for us to come together because we see each other as kind of like pieces more than people. I think. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I think, to kind of conclude, I think that, the world is, both of y'all are definitely right. I think the world is definitely, it's continually evolving, and, what's different, I mean, what's now maybe will be different 10, 15 years from now. So we don't know, how the world will be different, but we do know that some of the things that we talked about are still going to be common issues. Um, and I think, the purpose of, this episode today and, having these conversations about just how the world has changed over time from different perspectives, from yours and mine, is that it's a way of bridging gaps and kind of sharing knowledge and understanding the past and, and understanding each other better. Um, And I think that, you know, in terms of it, the reason why we do this is that the only way to improve for the future is to kind of understand, you know, what's happened in the past, what's happening currently, and trying to identify what we can do better. And, you know, while some elements of the world change, you know, like we talked about today with racism and other things, some things will always stay the same. Um, and, you know, just I encourage, you know, other people to, you know, have these similar conversations. I think it's important, you know, to learn from everybody's experiences. Um, and, you know, just before I, you know, sign off, Mom, Dad, did y'all have anything that you wanted to say as a final note?
Yeah, as a people, I think we need to kind of stop for a minute, drop our head for a minute, uh, and and not uh, move in our negative components, but to come together more within society. I think right now uh, I see, uh, unfortunately, more of us spreading into corners uh, within the society.
Okay.
I'd like to see us move back. And, maybe I shouldn't even say that, but move more into the corners as opposed to moving to the back, to the sides.
You want people to come together. Moving to the, I think you meant to say moving to the
Yeah, come
middle.
together.
Okay. Mama, anything? Final note that you know?
I think I could piggyback on that too. I think people need to start coming together and realize, regardless of what um, nationalism, race, sex, or anything that we are, in order for us to be able to live on this planet, period, we've got to have some compassion for each other and start thinking about helping each other to live as opposed to getting in our separate corners and thinking we got our little group, you got your little group, and everybody got their own little group and we're going to survive. So I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah, coming together as a society.
I definitely agree. I think that, you know, the I think the biggest change in the world has been that we don't that people in society don't come together as much as they used to. And I think, you know, in order for us to move back, I mean, that, you know, in order for the world to move forward, it'll have to be that. You know, people will definitely have to do that. So, all righty. Well, that is everything. I appreciate you all. You know, it's been a blast, do a good time doing this episode. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Again, you know, this is the Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It podcast. I'm your host, Robert Davis. Follow me on social media, like, subscribe to the show. It's on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and YouTube. Thank you to my parents for joining in and being my guest for this week's episode. And I will catch you all on the next time. All right. Bye bye, everybody.